Dobry wieczór Państwu. Za 15 minut rozpoczynamy próbę Don Carlo. Good evening, it's 5:45. We'll start in 15 minutes rehearsal. Don Carlo will be going step by step the whole performance. With the costume, of course. W niektórych momentach
Sometimes when I hear Kasia speaking to the microphone, it feels as if I was listening to myself. She really repeats some of my expressions, and to me it's very flattering. I tell her, that's good, you're right.
Dobrze mówisz. Jest taki specyficzny język teatralny.
There's this specific theatre vernacular, and on top of that we all develop also our very own method of communication. One person says, please set the lights on the audience at half. Whereas I, for example, tell my colleagues in the lighting box, give me a half, please.
Proszę połóweczkę.
Na pewno przejęłam. Połóweczkę też mówię.
I have surely taken this over. I also use the expression half. Just yesterday during the performance I said it. Colleagues laughed at it, although they of course knew this expression.
Mimo, że wszyscy znają to oczywiście.
Proszę Państwa, rozpoczynamy próbę. We'll just start with the rehearsal. Koledzy przy drzwiach.
Colleagues by the door behind the scenery. I hope you're all there. Good evening.
Dobry wieczór. Dziękuję, dziękuję koledzy.
Thank you. Colleagues by the ropes, good evening.
Dobry wieczór. Panie Krzysiu, gasi
Krish, please turn off the audience lights.
Yes, maestro, stage is ready. Jak to napisał autor francuskiego,
As the author of the French Dictionary of Theatre Terms, Patrice Pavis, wrote, a stage manager is a close assistant to the director of a performance,
odpowiedzialnym za
responsible for the organizational and technical part of a staged show.
Pozostając w cieniu,
Staying in the background, the stage manager discreetly makes sure of the excellence and the charm of the
za
production,
które zbiera pochwały reżyser.
for which the director is later praised.
Jakby pani chciała zostać inspicjentem, to po pierwsze
If you want to become a stage manager, the first thing to know is if you can read music and whether you have the resilience.
No i potem już trzeba zacząć
And then
praktykować.
you'd have to start practicing while working with a senior colleague.
Można się nauczyć tylko i wyłącznie
Only the student-master relationship makes it possible to learn this.
Już w trakcie pracy na widowni jako bileterka.
Already when I worked on the audience as an usherette, I observed the stage manager's work, and I hope that someday, maybe by some magical coincidence, I could also work in this profession. But these were only thoughts in my head.
W mojej głowie.
pojawiła się skromna, cichutka blondyneczka.
A modest, quiet blonde turned up, just a girl, and asked whether she could stand by the panel and watch. Well, of course you can stand and watch. She would come and come, very regularly. Every time she was in the theatre as usherette, she would come up to the stage and stand there quietly, not asking about anything, just watching.
Zaczęła zadawać pytania i rozmawiałyśmy.
Then she started asking questions, and we would talk about everything the stage manager should know about. The most important thing is to learn the technical aspect, master the equipment you work on. And this happened quite fast. Kasia was scrupulously writing down everything. She made very thorough notes, and during our joint work she asked about other details.
W pracy wspólnej dopytywała się o resztę. Uwaga na 8.
Watch out for the 8th.
Uwaga na krucyfiks.
Watch out for the crucifix.
System nauki wydaje się być bardzo prosty. To
The
jest
learning system seems very simple. This is a method based on imitation, as faithful as possible. So at the beginning I was trying not to do anything individually. I didn't carry out any of my own ideas.
Starałam się wiernie naśladować.
I tried to imitate everything accurately. Even more so since I had the opportunity of working together on the first 3 performances of In the Land of the Magic Flute.
Teresa prowadziła premierę.
Teresa conducted the premiere and the second performance. I carried out the third one under her guidance, and afterwards we took turns.
Oczywiście miałam swoje nuty, swoje notatki.
Of course I had my own score, my own notes, remarks, but it was a faithful imitation of Teresa's score.
Sposób też
The
komunikowania
method of
się
communicating with the team or giving instructions was also a precise copy of how Teresa did
z
it.
tego, co robiła Teresa.
Na początku, gdy Kasia zaczynała sama prowadzić przedstawienia na scenie kameralnej,
At the beginning, when Kasia started managing performances on the small stage, I would sit next to her and be stressed. Of course, she didn't show it at all, but I guess I was more tense than she was, because I knew I couldn't hold her by the hand. I knew I couldn't tell her what to do, so I didn't. But in my head, I was working with her all the time.
Ja byłam bardzo przyzwyczajona do tego, że Teresa jest.
I was very used to the fact that Teresa was there by my side. And when the time came for the fourth show, the one I was to be left alone with, I remember that when I was approaching the theater and crossing the courtyard, the first thing I did was check whether Teresa's car was parked there. It was a habit. When I was coming to my own performance, as soon as I entered the courtyard, I would check whether Teresa was in.
Często pracujemy razem.
We often work together, although Kasia is taking over, and that is very good. It's a very important moment when the student sits by the first panel and the so-called master takes the place by the second panel. The second stage manager has to obey the first one. They are compliant.
Przypomniało mi się coś zabawnego.
I've just remembered something funny. When we were working on Cinderella, Kasia was conducting this performance. I was the second stage manager. After the intermission, the chandelier was not lowered. The second act had already begun. There was no chandelier. And I suddenly heard my colleague from the stage management team saying,
Słuchaj, Siwy, nie opuściliście żerandola.
"Hey, Gray, you haven't lowered the chandelier." And immediately, in a fraction of a second, not waiting for Kasia's response, I said, "Do not lower it under any circumstance. No one has noticed that. If you lower it now, that would give it away. It should go up in a minute anyway." And only when I said it, I thought to myself, you have meddled in the competencies of a major stage manager. But no one said a word.
Teresa jest bardzo opanowaną osobą.
Teresa is a very composed person, and this is essential in our work.
Pierwsza premiera na
My first premiere on the big stage, Kurt Weill, was extremely stressful. Extremely. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep.
spać.
A to ja też nie mogę jeść ani spać, tylko pić.
The same goes for me. I can only drink. I also have stage fright before every premiere. I think everyone has. Only the person who's not aware really of what they are doing doesn't feel the pressure. It's important, however, not to show this stress to others. I remember when I was to invite artists for the first time to the small stage for the rehearsal, and I pressed the button activating the microphone 10 times, and 10 times I wasn't able to utter a single sound. I was so afraid of the thought that the entire theatre would hear my voice. That's how it is.
Wydaje mi się, że najprzyjemniej jest po premierze.
I guess the most pleasurable moment is after the premiere. Then the emotions are most intense. Of course, if everything goes according to plan, then all the pressure is gone. I think that's the nicest moment. You feel that you've done a good job. The effect is satisfying. The director is pleased. And that's when the stage manager has the greatest satisfaction.
I wtedy wydaje mi się, że inspicjent ma największą satysfakcję.
Panie Zbyszku, przesuwamy ścianę na prowadnicy.
Zbyszek, we're moving the wall on the track.
Karina, it's 5 minutes. Sprawia mi to przyjemność.
It's a real pleasure for me to see how my colleague Kasia achieved the higher level in the art of stage management. She's the favorite stage manager of the National Ballet. She's excellent at what she does. For me, this is a huge satisfaction.
Dla mnie to jest wielka satysfakcja.
Now the entire choir leaves through the second door.
Przez drugie drzwi wychodzi teraz cały chór.
The program was created in association with the Ministry of Labour and Social Policy and is co-financed from the means of the government programme for senior citizens' social activity for the years 2012-2013.